Hi all, I am Jeranipan and I am here to discuss on the topic risk and what are the basic steps in risk analysis. So now let's focus on what is risk. Organizational risk is a potential for losses due to uncertainty. It is a term for risk at the top level of an organization that includes material, strategic, reputational, regulatory, legal, security, and operational risk. Security vulnerabilities and threats. Financial risk such as unstable debt levels. So, that is organizational risk. So, now let's look into what are the basic steps in risk analysis. There are mainly 5 basic steps in risk analysis. So, now let's look into that. The first step in risk analysis is identifying the hazards. The second step is decide how might be harmed and how. And the third step is evaluate the risk and decide on precautions. The fourth step in risk analysis is record your findings and implement them. The last and final step in risk analysis is review your risk assessment and update if necessary. So now let's look into the first step, that is identify the hazards. So for example, in a factory or a workplace, they may use many types of substances for their daily work. So let's assume that in a factory or a workplace, the employees are exploited to the use of some chemicals or substances for their daily work, and the employee get affected by such substances or due to the use of such chemicals. In a factory, there may be many types of employees or workers. They may include young workers, migrant workers, new or expectant mothers, and people with many disabilities. So, they may be affected by the use of such chemicals or other harmful substances. So, the first steps in risk analysis is identifying the hazards. After identifying such a type of hazards, the second step is decide how might be harmed and how. Once we have identified the hazards, decide how likely is it someone could be harmed and how serious it could be. This is assessing the level of risk. We need to decide who might be harmed and how, what we are already doing to control the risk, what further action we need to take to control the risk, and who need to carry out the action and when the action is needed. And the third step in risk analysis is evaluate the risk and decide on its precautions. So, we need to decide how can we get rid of this hazard. Can we get rid of the hazards altogether, or if not, how can we control the risks so that harm is unlikely? We can also further look into redesigning the job, replacing the material or machinery or processes, organizing your work to reduce exposure to the materials, machinery or process, identifying and implementing practical measures needed to work safely, and providing personal protective equipment and making sure workers wear it. So, it is an example for the third step in risk analysis. Now, let's look into the fourth step in risk analysis, that is record your findings and implement them. So, if for example, if we employ 5 or more people, we must record the significant finding which includes the hazard, that is the thing that may cause harm and who might be harmed and how, and what you are doing to control the risk. And the last and the final step in risk analysis is review our assessment and update if necessary. We must review the control that we have put in place to make sure that everything is working as properly. We should also review if they are no longer be effective. There are changes in the workplace that could lead to new risk, such as changes to staff, process, substance, or equipments used, and also we need to review if the workers have spotted any problems or there have been accidents or near misses as per our above mentioned example. So, it is a 5 basic step in risk analysis. I think the 5 basic steps in risk analysis is clear by the use of above example. So, now let's look into why do we need risk analysis. Risk analysis is a proven way of identifying and assessing factors that could negatively affect the success of a business or project. It allows you to examine the risk that you or your organization face and help you decide whether or not to move forward with a decision. Now, let's look into what is risk. As per ISO, risk is the effect of uncertainty of objectives, whereas risk management is coordinated activities to direct and control an organization with regard to risk. And what is threat? Regarding threat, ISO provides information about its type, that is, physical damage, natural damage, or a technical failure, or so on. And the example includes fire, dust, flood, defective software, and so on. And its origin, which includes intentional, accidental, or so on. Threat is a process that magnifies the likelihood of a negative event, such as the exploit of a vulnerability. Now, let's look into probability of occurring a risk. The probability is the likelihood of an event occurring and the consequences, to which extent the project is affected by an event, are the impacts of risk. By combining the probability and impact, the level of risk can be determined. Now, let's look into the impact. A risk assessment should evaluate both likelihood and impact. The impact is an estimate of the harm that could be caused by an event. For example, a cyber breach could have a catastrophic impact. So, I think the portions, that is risk and the basic step in risk analysis, is clear to you. Thank you.
Good morning, all. Today, we are going to discuss about risk management cycle. Risk management process is a framework for the actions that need to be taken. There are 5 basic steps that are taken to manage a risk. These steps are referred to as the risk management process. It begins with identifying risk, goes on to analyze risk, and then risk is prioritized, a solution is implemented, and finally, the risk is monitored. First, identify the risk. The first step is to identify the risk that the business is exposed to its operating environment. There are many different types of risk: legal risk, environmental risk, market risk, regulatory risk, and much more. It is important to identify as many of these risk factors as possible. If the organization has a risk management solution employed, all this information is inserted directly into the system. The advantage of this approach is that these risks are now visible to every stakeholder in the organization within the access to the system. Assess the risk. Once a risk has been identified, it needs to be analyzed. The scope of the risk must be determined. It is also important to understand the link between risk and different factors within the organization. To determine the severity and seriousness of the risk, it is necessary to see how many business functions the risk affects. There are risks that can bring the whole business to a standstill if actualized, while there are risks that will only be minor inconvenience in the analysis. Next, select the risk control measures. Risks need to be ranked and prioritized. Most risk management solutions have different categories of risk. Depending on the severity of the risk, A risk that may cause some inconvenience is rated lowly. Risks that can result in catastrophic loss are rated the highest. It is important to rank the risk because it allows the organization to gain a holistic view of the risk exposure of the whole organization. The business may be vulnerable to several low-level risks, but it may not require upper management intervention. On the other hand, just one of the highest risk risks is enough to require immediate intervention. Implement risk controls. Every risk needs to be eliminated or contained as much as possible. This is done by connecting the experts of the field to which the risk belongs. In a risk management solution, all the relevant stakeholders can be sent notification from within the system. The discussion regarding the risk and its possible solution can take place from within the up system. Upper management can also keep a close eye on solution being suggested and the progress being made within the system. Last, monitor and review. Not all the risks can be eliminated. Some risks are always present. Market risk and environmental risks are just two examples of the risks that always need to be monitored. The risk management system monitors the entire risk framework of the organization. If any factor or risk changes, it is immediately visible to everyone. Computers are also much better at continuously monitoring risk than people. Monitoring risk also allows your business to ensure continuity. Thank you.
Today we are going to discuss about how risk is managed. Risk is a threat or possibility that an action or an event will adversely affect an organization's ability to achieve its objectives. A successful risk management program helps an organization consider the full range of the risks it faces. The following are the key steps for risk management. First one is identification of the risk. The purpose of risk identification is to reveal what, where, when, why, and how something could affect a company's ability to operate. Being able to identify the type of risk you have is vital to the risk management process. The four main risk categories are hazard risks such as fires and injuries, operational risk including turnover and supplier failures, financial risks such as economic recession, strategic risks which include new competitors and brand reputation. An organization can identify risk through experience and internal history, consulting with industrial professionals, and external research. Second step is to assess the impact and likelihood of those risks occurring. Risk manager will rank and prioritize each identified risk and opportunity by occurrence, probability, and impact severity. Knowing the likelihood and impact of your risk will show you where to spend your time and money and allow your team to prioritize their resources. Many organizations use heat map to measure their risks. A risk map is a visual tool that details which risks are frequent and which are more severe. The third step is right risk response and control measures. Organizations usually have the option to accept, avoid, control, or transfer a risk. Accepting risk means deciding that some risks are inherent in doing business and that benefits of an activity outweighs the potential risk. Avoiding simply means stopping the activities that causes the risk. Risk control involves prevention, that is reducing the likelihood that the risk will occur, or mitigation, which is reducing the impact it will have if it does occur. Transfer responsibility of a risk to a third party who would bear the consequences of the problem, as in case of an organization purchasing insurance. The fourth step is to monitor your risk. The organization, its environment, and its risks are constantly changing, so the process should be consistently revisited. Regularly monitor, track, and review your risk mitigation results to determine whether your initiatives are effective and whether changes or updates are required.
Good morning. Today I am here to present about types of risk. In today's competitive world, every organization is faced with a large number of risks impacting different aspects of the business. These risks should be appropriately classified to enable development and selection of appropriate risk management tools and practices. There are 12 types of risk. In this, I am discussing only about 5 types of risk. First one, financial risk. Second one, staffing or organization risk. Third one, credit risk. Fourth one, market risk. Fifth one, operational risk. First one, staffing or organization risk. It summarizes the uncertainties and hazards a company faces when it attempts to do its day-to-day activities within a given field or industries. Heavily dependent on human factor, mistakes due to actions or decisions made by a company's employees. For example, risk due to physical assets damaged and business disruption, losses relating to clients, products, and business practices. Credit risk. Risk of loss that may arise due to incomplete, inaccurate evaluation of the credit rating or risk of the issuers or borrowers. Although it is impossible to know exactly who will default on obligations, properly assessing and managing credit risk can lessen the severity of the loss. Interest payments from the borrower or issuer of a debt obligation are a lender's or investor's reward for assuming credit risk. Example, incomplete or inaccurate evaluation of the credit rating or risk of the external party. Market risk. The above is a risk that arises when certain changes in market trends have an impact on the business. Market risk and specific risk and systematic make up the two major categories of investment risk. Market risk, also called systematic risk, cannot be eliminated through diversification, though it can be hedged in other ways. Sources of market risk include recessions, political turmoil, changes in interest rates, natural disasters, and terrorist attacks. Systematic or market risk tends to influence the entire market at the same time. Example, margins being reduced, impacting the profits due to economic recession. Operational risk. Operational risk is the likelihood of a direct or indirect loss being incurred due to inappropriate or failed procedures, resources, and systems, or due to any other external actions. It arises from potential disruptions of business processes associated with the delivery of products or services to customers. Financial risk. Financial risk is a type of danger that can result in the loss of capital to interested parties. For governments, this can mean they are unable to control monetary policy and default on bonds or other debt issues. Corporations also face the possibility of default on debt they undertake but may also experience failure in an undertaking that causes a financial burden on the business. Thank you.
On the basis of the nature of risk, we can divide the risk into different types. We have already discussed about the few types of risk, and in this video we'll be discussing about the remaining types of risk. Systems or technology risk. This will affect the business in case the system has a technical problem or the technology becomes non-operational. Example, link, server, or any technological failure. Strategic risk. Strategic risk arises from the adverse effects of non-implementation of high-level business decisions. If the occur would be serious enough to alter the strategic direction of your business, impacting its future success or failure, strategic risk affects the different organization and at different levels. Lack of right offerings to address the customer needs, cost effectiveness or infrastructure, and the lack of offering of diversity services or products. Franchisee risk. Franchisee risk captures the impact of external or internal risk factors on the perceived long-term franchisee value of the firm. Next one is insurance risk. Insurance is a mechanism whereby an individual or a company and the insuring company agree that in return for a premium paid by the individual or company on the happening of certain loss event, the insuring company promises to pay compensation. The above risk arises as a result when the insurance policy is taken for an asset or business where the policy is not in line with the risk event. Example, inadequate tracking of terms and conditions with respect to insurance requirements leading to under-insurance cover. Legal risk. Legal risk refers to the damage or any loss incurred to the business due to the negligence in compliance with the laws related to the business. It can be encountered at any stage of the business proceedings. There may be mistakes due to the misunderstanding of law and due to some documents which may need to be deposited to the authority regulating that particular business. Types of risk such as regulatory risk, operational risk, etc. contribute to the term legal risk. Example, breach of any contracts, failure to comply with the laws and regulations, if a lease agreement for an office area is not renewed on time, etc. may create a legal risk. Financial reporting risk. The possibility that the documents a company files with the Securities and Exchange Commission or the SEC contain false information is financial reporting risk. The higher this risk is, the more it lowers the price of assets that depend on a company's financial health. Financial reporting risk arises from the non-compliance with the accounting policies or reporting requirements of regulators, tax authorities, and management information system. This includes the risk of submitting inaccurate or misleading information or failing to submit information in a timely manner that could cause misrepresentation of company's financial condition to regulators, investors, and other key constituencies. Thereby, a control that ensures compliance with financial reporting requirement is categorized as ICOFR. That means internal control over financial reporting. The example for financial reporting risk is not categorizing or tracking the financial reporting related controls or not passing entries in an appropriate account leading to errors in reporting. Information security risk. Information security risk comprises the impacts to an organization and its stakeholders that could occur due to the threats and vulnerabilities associated with the operation and use of information systems and the environments in which those systems operate. The primary means of mitigating information security related risk is through the selection, implementation, maintenance, and continuous monitoring of preventive, defective, and corrective security controls to protect information assets from compromise or to limit the damage to the organization should a compromise occur. Information security risk overlaps with many other types of risk in terms of kinds of impact that might result from the occurrence of a security-related incident. It is also influenced by factors attributed to other categories of risk, including strategic, budgetary, program management, investment, political, legal, reputation, supply chain, and compliance risk. Cross-border risk. This is the risk exposure arising from inadequate knowledge regarding laws and regulations. When the business is shifted to a different region, state, or country, cross-border risk is the risk that a foreign government or economy in a country in which a company or investors is doing business imposes conditions that affect a non-national company or investor's operations. These conditions often apply to the convertibility and transmissibility of foreign currency. Example, if a business unit is shifted from India to special economic zone in US, the unit will have to comply with the laws and regulations of CES. Risks that arise due to the non-adherence are cross-border risk. This is all about the types of risk. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Today we are discussing about risk treatment. Risk treatment follows risk analysis in the risk management process, and its goal is to select one or more options for addressing the risk and the implementing options. It includes risk acceptance, risk transfer, risk mitigation, risk avoidance, and risk elimination. The first one is risk acceptance. Risk acceptance is not really a mitigation strategy because accepting a risk does not reduce its effect. However, risk acceptance is a legitimate option in risk management. There are various reasons why companies may choose risk acceptance in certain situations. The most common reason is that the cost of risk management option, such as avoidance of limitation, may outweigh the cost of the risk itself. Second one is risk transfer. Risk transfer can be defined as a mechanism of risk management that involves the transfer of future risk from one person to another. And one of the most common examples of risk management is purchasing insurance, where the risk of an individual or a company is transferred to a third party. Risk mitigation. Risk mitigation is a strategy to prepare for and lessen the effects of threats faced by a business. Comparable to risk reduction, risk mitigation takes steps to reduce the negative effect of threats and disasters on business continuity. Threats that might put a business at risk include cyber attacks, weather events, and other causes of physical or virtual damage. Risk mitigation is one element of risk management and its implementation will differ by organization. Next one is risk avoidance. Risk avoidance is the elimination of hazards, activities, and exposures that can negatively affect an organization and its assets. While the complete elimination of all risk is rarely possible, a risk avoidance strategy is designed to deflect as many threats as possible in order to avoid the costly and disruptive consequences of a damaging event. Then the last one is risk elimination. Risk elimination is the process of removing the hazard from the workplace. It is the most effective way to control a risk because the hazard is no longer present. It is the preferred way to control a hazard and should be used whenever possible. Thank you.
Good morning all. Today we are going to discuss about understanding risk control. Risk control means the set of methods by which firms evaluate potential losses and take action to reduce or eliminate such threats. The business may first identify the risk involved in their day-to-day activities and take action to overcome those threats in order to function in an efficient way. It is a technique that utilizes findings from a risk assessment. The goal of risk control is to identify and reduce potential risk factors in a company's operation that may affect the well-being of the firm. By identifying and reducing this risk, they may be able to perform in a better way and to increase their profit. The core concepts of risk control include: first one, avoidance. It means avoiding the risk and it is the best method of risk control. Then loss prevention. It means it attempts to minimize the loss rather than eliminating it. Next, loss reduction. It accepts the risk and seeks to limit the losses caused by those risks. And separation involves dispersing key assets so that catastrophic events at one place location affect the business only at that particular location. Duplication involves creating a backup plan and is performed by using technology. And diversification allocates business resources for creating multiple lines of business rather than offering a single product or service. Next, we are going to discuss about risk control strategies. First one, apply safeguards. It means avoidance of risk. Then transferring the risk. Third one is reducing the impact caused by those risks. And the last one, inform themselves of all the consequences and accept the risk. Thank you.
Controlling means ensuring that activities in an organization are performed as per the plans. Let's go through the definition of controlling. Controlling is a management function which helps to check errors in order to take corrective action. This is done to minimize deviation from standard and ensure that the stated goals of the organization are achieved in a desired manner. Let's go through various characteristics of controlling process. Control is a management process. It's a continuous process. It's an end-to-end process. It's an action-oriented process. It saves time. It is closely linked with planning and it is a tool for achieving organizational activities. Various elements are included in the control system, and the four basic elements in a control system are the characteristic or condition to be controlled, the sensor, the comparator, and the activator. Controlling process involves various steps, and we are going to discuss about various steps that are included in the controlling process. And they are establishment of standard, step 2 measurement of actual performance, step 3 comparing actual performance, step 4 analyzing the cause of deviation, and step 5 taking corrective action. The first step of the controlling process is establishment of standard. Standards are the criteria against which actual performance will be measured, and standards are set in both quantitative and qualitative terms. Thus, standards serve as benchmarks toward which an organization strives to work. And the second step is measurement of actual performance. Once performance standards are set, the next step is measurement of actual performance. Performance should be measured in an objective and reliable manner. There are several techniques for measurement of performance. And third step is comparing actual performance. This step involves comparison of actual performance with standard. Such comparison will reveal the deviation between actual and desired result. Comparison becomes easier when standards are set in quantitative terms. For example, performance of a salesman in terms of units sold in a week can be easily measured against a standard output for the week. Step 4. Analyzing the cause of deviation. Some deviation in performance can be expected in all activities. It is therefore important to determine the acceptable range of deviation. Also, deviations in key areas of business need to be attended more urgently as compared to deviation in certain insignificant areas. Step 5 is taking corrective action. The final step is in the controlling process is taking corrective action. No corrective action.
Hello everyone, I am Jacob Joe Johnson. Today I am going to discuss the topic types of control. Types of control. In types of control, organizational control system allow executives to track down how well the organization is performing, identify the area of concern, and take action to address the concerns. Three basic type of control systems are available to executives. One, output control. Two, behavioral control. And three, client control. The internal control can be divided into preventive control, detective control, corrective action, and preventive action. What is preventive control? Preventive controls are used to keep a loss or an error from occurring. Examples of preventive controls are segregated duties and physical protection of assets. These controls are typically integrated into a process so that they are applied on a continual basis. They are especially common when the severity of a loss is considered to be quite high, so that their imposition will lower the probability of any loss ever occurring. Here are some preventive control components. Hazard analysis, preventive controls, supply chain programs, verification, monitoring procedures, corrective actions, record keeping, recall plan. Examples of preventive controls include separation of duties, pre-approval of actions and transactions such as authorization, access controls such as passwords and getter link authentication, physical control over assets, that is locks on doors or a safe for cash or checks. Employee screening and training such as PRO series to increase employee knowledge. Now we can look at the advantages of preventive control. Greater accuracy is achieved in assigning personal responsibility. Preventive control hastens corrective actions and make it more effective. Preventive control may lighten the managerial burden caused by direct controls. The psychological advantage avoided the subordinates feeling that superiors do not rate fairly. What is a detective control? Detective control is an accounting term that refers to a type of internal control intended to find the problems within a company's process once they have occurred. Detective controls may be employed in accordance with many different goals, such as quality control, fraud prevention, and legal compliance. One example of a detective control is a physical inventory count, which can be used to detect when the actual inventories do not match those in accounting records. Now we can look at what is detective control versus preventive controls. What are preventive and detective control, and what is the difference between these controls? Preventive control is designed to identify and stop an issue from occurring. Detective control is designed to identify an issue upon occurrence. In each case, management has defined the activity or triggers of that activity that control is reporting to. Preventive controls cannot be designed to identify and prevent every risk from occurring. Thus, detective controls are the other half of the control structure and attempt to identify those issues or risks not able to manage through a preventive controls that management has determined need to be addressed. As an example of how both preventive and detective controls are found within four main types of internal controls, a detective IT general control for security would be reporting to IS operations inappropriate attempts to access a system or application. The preventive IT general control for security would be locking out the user account after a predetermined number of failed attempts to access a system or application through that user's account. Here are that is detective versus preventive control. Here are some examples of preventive and detective controls. Approval for purchase over $10,000. Password for access to general ledger. Petty cash held in lockbox. Security and surveillance system. Pre-numbered checks. We can look at detective control. Supervisor review for proper approval. Run report showing activity of users. Reconcile petty cash, physical inventory counts. Review missing voided checks. Here are some advantages of detective controls. Less expensive and more reliable, can be applied over a large number of transactions in a short time. Disadvantages of detective controls, a continuous operating expense is involved, which can be costly. These controls present evidence of occurring loss, but do not prevent a loss from occurring. That's all. Thank you.
In this video, we are going to discuss about the other two types of control. They are corrective action and preventive action. Corrective action is an improvement or series of improvements to an organization's business process and procedures to correct the root cause of a non-conformance and to prevent their reoccurrence. They are the mechanism that drive continuous improvement. It is an aspect of quality management that aims to rectify a task, process, product, or even a person's behavior. Then now let's look at the steps in corrective action process. First one is defining and describing the problem, then defining the scope, containment actions, identifying the root cause, planning a corrective action, implementing it, then follow up to make sure the plan worked. Then one example for corrective action is putting out a fire in the office. This action eliminates the problem. Corrective actions, on the other hand, eliminate the root cause of the problem, preventing future issues also. The corresponding corrective actions then address the root cause of the fire, such as fixing of old wiring. Then, steps in the control process includes establishing performance standards, determining performance measurements, measuring performance, then comparing it with standards and evaluating them, then taking corrective actions if necessary. The second one is preventive action. Preventive action are the activities taken by the organization to eliminate the cause of a potential process non-conformity. Preventive action is any proactive methodology used to determine potential discrepancies before they occur and to ensure that they do not happen. Then, example for preventive action includes implementing new training programs for employees, regularly reviewing and updating company documents, then conducting internal audits and performing regular maintenance on equipments and machineries also. Then, this slide shows the difference between corrective action and preventive action. Corrective action is used after a problem and preventive action is used before a problem. The type of activity. Corrective action is a reactive activity, whereas preventive action is a proactive activity. So I hope this concept is clear for you all. Thank you for listening.